This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
In this episode, Valeria Teles interviews Dennis Houchin, the author of The Passion Principles, a guide to identifying and creating a life of authentic passion. He made this ebook available for free at all major ebook retailers. Dennis is now set to bring his messages of motivation, passion, and overcoming adversity to audiences around the globe. From middle and high school students to seasoned business people, his presentations use humor and a deep personal connection with the audience to engage his audience and help them see the world anew in a way that enables them to live a more satisfying, more fulfilling life. He teaches the same principles that he personally used to go from being a high school dropout with severe learning disabilities to becoming a highly educated expert in information technology, completing his Baccalaureate of Science degree and earning his Master of Science degree while raising a family, building a business, writing 2 books, building a speaking career, and most recently becoming an Adjunct Professor of Cybersecurity at Vanderbilt University. Dennis Houchin spent 4 decades as an entrepreneur, software developer, engineer, and top technology executive on the cutting edge in the information technology field. He developed expertise in the areas of software development, network and security engineering, and currently teaches cybersecurity at Vanderbilt University. In 2009, he began to focus more on hacking human systems, specifically on understanding and applying the personality theories established by C.G. Jung to the various technical, marketing, and operations people that had difficulty understanding each other. Dennis has addressed audience of national security and hospitality industry conventions on the subject of improving IT productivity by improving the relationships between business managers and technical service professionals. In 2015, Dennis released his first publicly available book, The Achievement Protocol, which synthesizes the disciplines of strategic planning, project management, and task management into an easy-to-use system that anyone can use to help them achieve their life's goals. Here is the interview with Dennis Houchin.
In your own words, who is Dennis Houchin?
Dennis Houchin is somebody who has struggled through a lot of issues in life like everybody else has. And he's somebody who has been able to understand life in a way that helps him conquer some of those issues. He's a person who is committed to sharing the things that he's learned with other people because he recognizes that other people also go through similar struggles and they can use some help along the way in understanding it. That's my main passion in life, is to be able to help other people become as great as they are. Most people don't realize how great they are. And I try to help them understand that there is a process by which they can reveal that greatness.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. I have a few warm-up questions for you before we talk about your book, The Passion Principles. So the first question is, what is life?
What is life? I wish I would have had a moment to read these questions. Life is a journey of growth, a journey of development, a journey of service. Life is learning to serve others, to help others, using your own particular strengths and talents. We're not all the same. My purpose in life is going to be different than yours. It's going to be different than the person who lives next door to me. We all have different purposes. We all have different skills that we can share. And life is about discovering what those are and discovering how we can not only develop ourselves, but we can help others develop themselves so that we can grow through this world and end up leaving the world maybe a little bit better off than when we came into it.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, growing together. I love that idea. What do you think is the opposite of life?
I suppose the opposite of life is eking out a kind of a mean existence. And by mean, I don't mean angry, although it probably will lead to that. But I mean being able to realize that you have the ability to grow and to develop and to conquer the areas in your life that you feel are your inadequacies. You can actually do things to change those. And what is the opposite of life? The opposite of life is living a meager existence, a mean existence where you just kind of wallow at a low level and you don't strive to succeed and to accomplish all that you are able to accomplish in life.
I love that, Dennis. Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. Yeah. What is the meaning of freedom to you?
Well, freedom is the ability to do not only what you want to do, but what you're called to do. It's the ability to have your own ideas and allow other people to have their ideas, but not allow other people to impose their ideas upon you. We all can learn from each other. We all, have lessons that we can teach others. We have lessons that we can learn from others. But not everything that everybody says is right or applicable to our lives. So we have to have the ability to pick and choose, what we think is helpful to us. And that is freedom, is being able to control our own minds, being able to control our thoughts and our consciousness to the extent that it serves us in our development, so that, because in turn, we're going to do that so that we can serve the world and, as we said before, grow together. So that's what freedom is. When you try to impose your ideas on somebody else, you're taking away their freedom. And the same is true if they try to impose their ideas on yours, then they're removing your freedom. And you can never excel when you're trying to achieve somebody else's idea of perfection.
So true. And that takes self-knowledge, self-awareness, doesn't it?
Yes.
What is the world's greatest need, in your opinion?
Self-awareness, self-knowledge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Perspective. It's so important that we see not only who we are, but how we fit in the greater scheme of the world. And I think a lot of times there are people out there, and I'm not excluding myself. I used to be one of those people that don't really have that perspective, and they don't see themselves as being anything more than the time that they spend in a given day, and so they look for things that make them happy during the day or during the night, and that's what they think happiness is, and that's not really what happiness is, and that's not what joy is, and that's not what passion is. And so the need that the world has right now is really a deeper awareness of who we are. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, a Jesuit priest from the 1800s, early 1900s, he said that we are not humans seeking a spiritual experience, but we are spirits seeking a human experience. And so many of us don't recognize that. The human part of us is spending too much time taking control or trying to take control and not allowing the spiritual part of us to develop and grow the way that it needs to.
What is love to you, Dennis?
Well, love is, to me, is like all of these words. I think it's a very misunderstood word. Love to me is not a emotion. It's not an emotion. It's not a feeling. A lot of people equate love with some kind of intense attraction or intense desire, and for me, love is more profound than that. It's a deep power that arises from our ability to have empathy with others and to care about other people.
Yeah, it goes back to that idea you mentioned earlier, growing together, right? That I very much agree.
Yes.
What, where, and who is God to you?
Well, I'm glad you added those last two words in there, to you, because
Yeah.
because I'm not going to pretend to know who God is. The people have struggled with that question for millennia. Ever since man could think, he's been thinking about that very question. For me, God is the creator of the universe, and he is the source of all knowing. He is the source of all love. God is love. Each one of us, that spiritual part of us that I was talking about, is a connected part of God. So each one of us carries around a fragment of God with us. Not that God is fragmented in any way, but each of us has a little taste of God within ourselves. And ideally, what we want to do is we want to live our lives in such a way that little piece of God can shine as brightly through us as possible. I spoke to my son about this long ago when I was raising my kids. I talked to him about, I had a piece of acrylic that I had shaped into a dome, and I had made it made it out of a mold, but the mold was rough and the surface was crude, so you couldn't see through it. So I showed him how it was opaque and you couldn't see anything, and it didn't do any good. But then I gave him a task to do, and I had him start polishing it. We used different waxes and stuff to rub it, rubbing compounds, and he rubbed it, and he rubbed it, and he rubbed it, and it took days. This was this project to keep him busy. When to keep him out of trouble. So, but he kept doing this, and eventually it got so, the surface became so clear that it could be used as a magnifying glass. You could put it on a sheet of paper, and you could read the enlarged words through it. And so then I explained to him that God is like that. God is inside of us, but we are imperfect vessels. And so the more we work on ourselves, the more we can clean up our human selves, the more perfectly we can kind of express that light of God that is in us, regardless of who we are or how horrible we are as people. And some of us, you got to admit, are horrible people. But no, whether, it doesn't matter how horrible you are or how wonderful you are, we all have that same piece of God within us, and we all have the ability to shape ourselves in such a way that piece of God can shine through us.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Dennis. Everything you said resonates and makes so much sense. I just wonder if God is also in the imperfections if the what we perceive as horrible, those people or those, I don't know, events, they have a purpose. Like what's happening now, who knows, maybe this is happening for a reason, that we can learn from this. We could learn profound lessons of wisdom.
Yes, I think that's absolutely true, that we can learn profound wisdoms. And I think that pain is an opportunity for us to learn. And, it doesn't mean that there was a lesson necessarily intentional within the pain, but it's an opportunity for us as thinking beings to reflect and understand, kind of the causes of that pain and what might be done to avoid it in the future. And with knowledge is so, we live on different levels of knowledge all the time. We have a literal knowledge, but there's also metaphorical knowledge. And, sometimes it's difficult to distinguish which is the more real or the more relevant to us, whether it's the metaphorical knowledge or the literal knowledge. But so many things have lessons for us on all of these different levels that, it's wrong to pick out one particular idea that you get, like learning to not shake hands. Maybe that's the lesson. Well, that may be a lesson, but there may be some deeper lessons within the spread and the quickness of this environment, and not only in the spread of the virus itself, but in the way we've reacted to it. What can we learn about the way that we've reacted to it as individuals and as our leaders have reacted? What are some lessons there, and do they have some more deeper meaning than just what we see about and read about on TV?
Right. I love what you said just now about the opportunities. Challenges are opportunities. And that made me think about self-awareness and self-knowledge again. If we are self-aware, then it's easier to see these challenging times or situations as opportunities.
Yes.
So true. So let's talk about your work. My first question has to be this one. What is your definition of passion?
Well, my definition, again, is like, and you might have guessed already that I tend to go into words rather deeply, and I look at the beginnings of words and how they were created, their origins, and I do my best to really understand what they meant and what they were intended to mean when they first started out, and then how they've evolved in the process. And so, and I didn't realize this so much before I wrote this book, The Passion Principles. I had an understanding of passion that I thought was shared by everybody. And I thought that because it seemed to be a widespread understanding within the circle of friends, circle of associates that I was with. We all had, similar understandings of what passion was. But then when other people started reading my first book, The Achievement Protocol, and they started telling me, about their struggle with passion and not understanding it, that's when I realized that, hey, not everybody understands passion the way I do. So here, passion for me, its literal meaning was a word that was created in order to express the pain that Jesus went through after he was arrested and he was tortured and then crucified. All of that pain that happened, during that period in his life after that Last Supper. And that was the reason that the word was created. And so the root of the word passion is a word for pain, and the same root for struggle. It's the same word that is the root for patience. So when I think about passion and I think about having a life passion, it's not about what is fun necessarily. It can be. It's not about what is pleasing. It's about what do you love so much that you are willing to literally go through intense pain in order to achieve. So when I hear about, somebody talking about their passion, I reflect on people like Mother Teresa, who, served in the streets of Calcutta in India, and all of the poor people that she served. You could not say by any stretch of the imagination that she had an easy life, or that it was a joyful life in the way so many of us think about joy. But she was acting out her passion, and she was willing to go through that because her mission was that important to her. Now, you would never hear Mother Teresa complain. She had this pain, but she knew that was a part of the game. She knew that, that was just a part of her life. I imagine she was probably one of the most fulfilled persons that have existed in history, because she knew from a very early time what her passion was, and she found a way to fulfill that passion every single day. And so although she was, she wasn't rich, she wasn't, didn't have money, she didn't have power in the way that a lot of us think of power, she had something that was far more important to her, and that was the successful completion of her mission. And when I talk about success, again, another word that I think is profoundly misunderstood is success is the ability to achieve those things that are important to you. And it's, it can be the acquisition of, financial wealth, that can be a part of success, but it doesn't have to be. There are successful people in all walks of life, in all income brackets. And success is more about how fulfilled you are internally, how you feel that you've accomplished rather than how much you've acquired.
I didn't know that passion was connected to, intuitively, I knew, but not in the way that you spoke of. It's connected to pain and patience, and meaning and purpose. That makes so much sense.
Right.
Let's talk about your book. What was the inspiration, intention, and the process of writing The Passion Principles?
Okay, so I mentioned this briefly, but this is actually my second book. The first book I wrote was called The Achievement Protocol. And the Achievement Protocol kind of is a summation of a lot of the practical lessons that I've learned in life, having achieved my success. By the time I was 33, I had started my own business, and I never had to go, beg for money or beg for a job after that. I was self-employed, and that was in 1994 is when I first started my business independently. I had another venture where I had partners, but that didn't really count because I was too young to realize what was going on at that time. But in 1994, I started an information technology business, and I had a direct relationship with all of my customers. I didn't work for somebody else. I went out and found the people that needed the kinds of things that I could provide to them, and negotiated what they would pay for it, and that served me quite well for 35 years. Well, I wasn't in business for 35 years, but I had an IT career for 35 years. And so it allowed me, so in 2014, I decided that I needed to maybe think about slowing down a little bit. And it was the apex of a lot of different things happening in my life at that time. My youngest daughter graduated was just about ready to graduate from college, and my youngest boys have already completed theirs and were into their careers. My daughter was lined up to go into the military. She had her career. She was all set. So we decided to evaluate what we were doing, and I decided, actually, it was a conversation with my daughter that led me to conclude that what I needed to do was write out some basic instructions, like a how-to book on how to achieve things, because she inspired me with that, because she came home one day and said so many of her friends, getting close to the end of their college careers, they don't really understand what they want to do with their life. They don't know how to successfully navigate the last year in college, and so she wanted to know if I had any way of helping them. And I first thought about an app, and then it became a book. And the book, The Achievement Protocol, is written in order to give people kind of a practical guide to how to set a goal and achieve it. And I know you can use it for small goals, but what I've got written in the book, you can also use, for life goals, for the things that you decide you want to do when you're, 13 years old. And, if it's meaningful, and it shows you how to evaluate that, then it shows you how to go through the process of, making that happen. So when I wrote that book, I found out a lot of people were reading it, and when I would have discussions about it, I would hear the same question over and over: was, how do you know what your passion is? How do you find your passion? And when I would start to explain, kind of the ideas about passion that I had, like that it was about what you're willing to have, go through a lot of pain for, they're suddenly like, well, no, I'm not really, that's not what I want. I want the fun stuff. Give me the fun stuff,
Wow. Yeah.
And so I thought, there's a widespread misunderstanding of what authentic passion, there's lots of different passions, and the other ones are valid too, but the kind of passion that leads to a fulfilling life is one that is different than what, some of the popular ideas about passion. So I decided to write the passion principles to help people distinguish, and help them see a different view of passion than maybe they have been exposed to. And so I wrote this, and I set it out on Amazon for free. I made it free on multiple platforms, so any place you get ebooks from, it can be downloaded for free. I don't charge anything for it, because I think it's something that, I want everybody to live a fulfilling life, and you can't do that until you really understand that, living a happy and fulfilling life does not mean living a life without pain. Pain is going to be part of the process, and it can be a useful part of the process, but it's going to be there, and you can't avoid pain and expect to live a life that you're proud of in the end.
Wow, but that is such a insightful advice and thought, because most of us tend not to think that way, that a meaningful life it's supposed to be a fun one and always happy, but it's not. Yeah, that's not realistic. So let's talk about the chapters in your book. Chapter 1, it's about the pursuit of passion. And I selected a passage, and I have a few questions for you based on that. So you just mentioned authentic passion, and this is what you talk about here. Authentic passion is grounded on our deepest core values, and one that consistently directs us to higher consciousness. Basically, this is what you wrote there. So I have 3 questions. The first one is about values. What is the difference between values and beliefs?
I guess in some ways they are synonymous. I think you can have beliefs that aren't necessarily values, and certainly that aren't core values. You can believe that everything is fine at home. That's not necessarily a core value. And things may or may not be fine at home, you know. So you can believe things that aren't necessarily, or you can have a belief that isn't necessarily a core value, but all of your core values tend to be beliefs because it's at the very, you know, essence of who we are and what our consciousness is. We don't really have, we're not computers, so we don't just have strict input data that we know has been validated and is true, right? With a computer, you can have that. You can check to make sure that a string has only ASCII characters in it. But with our consciousness, we don't do that. Our values come into us usually at a fairly young age. They start building, and they're shaped by, you know, the people who are raising us, you know, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. But the environment that we're raised in helps create our values, plus our own personal disposition. We can be predisposed to be cynical and therefore interpret things and experiences that happen to us differently than a person who is predisposed to be optimistic. They can interpret the same actions and same experiences in a different way. I have a twin sister, and I've got several brothers, a couple of brothers. My parents had 5 kids, and my sister and I were the youngest in the family. And if you were to take any of us one at a time and take us into an interview room and ask us about our parents, about the important parts of our childhood and our child rearing, and what our parents did right and what our parents did wrong, every single one of us would give you different information and a different story. That was a painful realization for me when you know, I had some ideas about my parents and my mother, and I found out that my brothers did not share at all, you know, with the way that I understood what was going on in our childhood. So, but all of that was a growth experience, and so what happened to them, even though we all grew up together, we were all in the same house, all experiencing the exact same thing, they got a different set of values from those experiences than what I got. So, so values are beliefs in that there's not just raw, you know, 100% fact that you can say this is what happened and this is the truth. So you have to qualify it, and but if you understand what those values are and how they affect your life, you don't necessarily have to accept them if you find that the values that you've been given are wrong, or they are skewed in some way. You can change them and you can correct them, and it takes effort, but you can fix those things. And I thank God that I was able to find a way to do this. You know, once I left a pretty toxic environment in school, I was able to find a way to essentially get my mind right about what my core values were and what life was really about. And I did it in record time, I think. And so from a very early age, I've kind of felt like I've had a head start.
That's incredibly wonderful. I guess my question about that, how did you do it? Most of us for most of us, it takes years, so many years. My case was like 38 years to find out what my passion was.
So what happened was, this goes back to my time in high school. I was, even before that, when I was about 6 years old, I developed epilepsy, and I had petit mal epilepsy. And for the listeners that have never experienced that, there's two different types of epilepsy. There's grand mal and there's petit mal. And with grand mal, it's clear to everybody that you're having a seizure because you lose all muscle control. And, you know, if you're standing in a room, it might look like you're throwing chairs around or running into people and things like that, because you just lose complete control of your muscles, and your muscles no longer do what they're supposed to do. And then you convulse on the ground. Usually that's where you end up. And it's a very dramatic scene to witness. With petit mal, the seizures are actually almost invisible because they're called absence seizures. And it's like, to experience one, it's just like a sliver of time has been taken out, like a 20-second period of time disappears and just doesn't exist. For example, if I'm talking to you and I'm speaking and all of a sudden I have a seizure, there might be, I shorten that because I know we're on time limit, but there's going to be a brief pause, and it usually is more like 20 seconds or so in a seizure, and then I'll just pick up right where I left off. And if I'm talking, you notice it. If I'm just listening, you won't notice anything because it just looks like I'm just listening and I have a seizure, but I've missed 20 seconds of what you said. And so that led to teachers thinking that I had a learning disability because they would teach me things and they'd tell me things, and then they'd say, "Do you understand?" And I'd nod my head, and then I wouldn't be able to repeat what they said. And so I got rid of the epilepsy I outgrew it about the time I was 13 or so. And then my peer group, you know, I was still going to school with the same people that knew me when I had the seizures. And I was an object of ridicule because of that, because I was different. And we all know how cruel kids can be. So the same people still knew me from when I had the seizures. It didn't matter to them that I didn't have them anymore. They treated me as if I did. And the same was true with the teachers. They just knew that I was incorrigible and couldn't be taught. And so they treated me that way. It wasn't until I dropped out of school when I was 16, and I got away from that environment and started interacting with adults, or, you know, people who were at least, you know, some were, you know, in their mid-30s, but some were just a few years older than me. They didn't know that I had any baggage like that. They didn't treat me like I had a mental problem. So they discussed things with me, and they discussed ideas with me, and I started reading books that, you know, nobody thought I would be able to read, you know, just a couple of weeks before that. And so I started having discussions, and I realized that I'd never actually had a learning disability. The teachers had a teaching disability. And when I realized that, and I realized it wasn't something wrong with me that was causing me to be unsuccessful in school, I became a student, and I started reading and discovering ideas. And I discovered ideas, I think probably my first exposure was from Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And he gave me some really great ideas that I, you know, since, you know, found in other books, you know, from other periods of time. And I thought to myself, you know, if this stuff is real, I've got to share it with people. If this can help me become successful, then it can help anybody become successful. And, you know, I had as many limitations, as many weaknesses as anybody I can imagine. And if I can come out of that abyss and claw my way back up to the top than anybody can, because I had, there was nothing special that would have necessarily predicted that I'd be able to do that. So my passion from that time has been to help people understand that they can do so much more than they might believe that they can.
And that's a wonderful work. I love what you do because, most people, they believe in their own limitations.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned higher consciousness. What does it mean exactly, Dennis, when you say higher consciousness?
The higher consciousness is that part of us that I was talking about earlier that is, most directly connected to God. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the raw God material, if you will, but it's that piece of us, because it operates through our physical brain. We don't necessarily have it without our brain functioning. So it is a manifestation sort of our physical ability to be able to have consciousness, but it's that piece where our true values, our true sense of purpose, our true identity, where all of that really resides, and it's kind of who we define ourselves as on a very, very high level. And I need to be careful in talking about this because whenever we talk about God, it just gets messy because we know so little and we think we know so much. But what I believe about God is that he is indivisible, that he is, there is a God and it is a whole God, and you don't have individual parts of God. But in our experience of God, we kind of experience him in part.
Right.
So our human experiences are not dealing with the raw God nature, if you will. But our higher consciousness is kind of that doorway that opens up into, where what would be God resides, and that's the most purest sense of who we are, and our most direct access to the things that are good and holy.
Yeah. So in chapter 2, you talk about the perception of passion. And do you want to make a comment about this chapter?
Well, I would just say that the perception of passion is something that evolves over time. So as we grow and become more self-aware, we are going to have a better understanding of what our passion is. A lot of times our passion will operate and we will behave in ways that serve our passion without really understanding what our passion is. And we just do that accidentally, and we stumble along until, one day we realize that all of our decisions, not all of our decisions, but many of our decisions up to that moment have led us into these different experiences, which have helped us realize this passion that has actually, been there all along.
Yeah. And then chapter 3 and 4, 3, you talk about pain of passion, which you have been talking about. 2, you talked earlier, pleasure of passion as well. Now, chapter 5, you talk about presence of passion. And this is a very interesting one. You have been talking too about children and encouraging them to follow their passion. Talk to me about your son, Wayne.
All of my life, I have been discouraged from pursuing my passion. When you tell people you're reading Think and Grow Rich and they've never heard of it before, they laugh at you. And I'm not talking about acquaintances. I'm talking about people that are you think are your deepest personal friends. They mock you, and So I experienced that on my own, but then I'm able to see it happen in so many other places. So many kids and psychologists have this understanding about child development, and most of them agree that it's around the age of puberty when all of the pieces and parts are together enough for people to actually develop core values and passions. Personally, I think that the process has already begun, and it just culminates about the time that you hit puberty and it's able to be expressed. So I think you can see hints of somebody's passion early on, but then we go out, and if our passion doesn't line up with what people think is normal in society, they just do everything they can to squash you, because they don't want anybody rising above the herd, because that makes everybody else around them look bad. And I experienced this I'll get to my son in just a second, but
Yeah.
but I experienced this in my professional life. It wasn't too long ago. I was with one of my clients, and we had a presentations that we were all going to give for an important quarterly business meeting. And I developed my presentations and kind of shared it with some people. And then, I did my presentation kind of independently of everybody else. I wasn't really thinking of who was doing what. I was just trying to do the best job I could do. And the feedback I got from one of them was really scorn, because he was irritated that my presentation was so well thought out and so well prepared that his was going to look like nothing. And, I okay, I'm sorry for that, but I'm just doing the best I can. And but that's what people do all of the time. When they see somebody starting to excel, they'll, doesn't matter how old you are, they do it, and they do it all through life. So my son Wayne was always interested in magic as a child, because I had an interest in magic, and I kind of he was one of my first audiences, because
That's so cute.
at 3 years old I could make a coin vanish, and he would just be amazed. But then as he got older, we would watch David Copperfield videos and such on TV and record them on our VCR. And we got an opportunity to go see him live when he was, I think it was like 5 years old at that time. But so he knew what magic was, and he knew he liked it. And about, I guess he was 9 years old, he started making. Well, he was behaving in ways that 9-year-olds typically behave, and starting to show signs that maybe he was pulling away. So I wanted to pull him back into the family. And so I talked to him about his life and what he actually wanted to do with his life. And he said that he wanted to be a magician. This wasn't a, quick question and answer. I told him to go think about it. I said, I want you to just pretend that you could do anything you wanted for the rest of your life, but you had to do it, all the time. What would you want to do? And so he went and thought about it, and he came back and he said he wanted to be a magician. And so I started working with him, teaching him things. And, I could tell that his interest was sincere, that it wasn't just a fad for him. And finally, when he was like 12 years old, he had his first public performance. And today, or at least up until the coronavirus came in, he's performing magic every day. And he's 37 years old now, and he does it every day. And that's his livelihood. He's an entrepreneur. He's completely self-employed. So he and his wife live in Chico, California. And he not only performs magic, but he teaches magic. And actually, earlier this year, he had an opportunity to go back to China. He's been to China, he's been on some major television shows in China, and he had an opportunity to go back, but that got canceled, and that was just before the coronavirus came out in Wuhan. And in fact, the last time he was on a trip to China, he was in Wuhan.
That is incredible. What a beautiful example, Dennis, of not just following your passion, but being supported to do so.
So when he was 16, he went to his pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, "So what are you going to do for a living?" And he said, "I'm going to be a magician." And the pediatrician says, "You can't do that." No, I mean, seriously, what kind of job are you going to get? You can't support anything. You can't support yourself being a magician. And he was serious. He was actively being discouraging, and I couldn't believe that. You know, I can see disbelief. I can see, oh, well, gosh, good luck with that. But no, he was actually saying, no, you can't do that. Don't do that. That's a stupid thing for you. He didn't say stupid, but that's what my son walked away with, is that the guy said it was a stupid thing to even try to do. And that just burns me up, you know?
Yeah, because people don't have the courage to follow. First of all, they don't know themselves well to even know what their passion is.
Yeah.
And then when they find out, they don't have the courage to follow it. It's easy to know why they discourage others. So they try to do it because they have not lived that life. They don't have the experience. Like it has been said, you can only give what you have. So that's what it is. Thank you so much for giving what you have, a lot of wisdom. And that's what we need more in the world. Continue with your book. We're almost at the end of the interview. And the book has 10 chapters. And you talk about the precision of passion. You talk about persistence of passion, which is a very important one, chapter 7. And then the payment of passion, which you talked earlier about success, the definition of success. And you actually mentioned Bob Dylan's quote, a very good one. I love this quote. It's a song, I think it's part of the song, right, that he sang, I'm not sure. A man is a success if he gets up in the morning, gets to bed at night, and in between, he does what he wants to do. Right. In chapter 9, you talk about...
the plurality.
Yes, right. Having multiple core values and multiple passions. That was an interesting one.
Yeah, we aren't just monolithic creatures with just a single passion or a single mission. There's different areas of our lives where, one passion might be relevant and another passion not, so yeah, that's important to know, that we don't just have, one purpose. We might have multiple purposes depending on, the areas of life that it operates in.
True. And how do we choose? How do we know the most important one?
Well, I think that's a matter of, deciding which one, if you could only do one, which one would that be?
The question, yeah.
Yeah, so it's setting priorities and the season of life that you're in has a lot to do with it. So like we talked about the Grandma Moses, and her, for a long time, her passion was raising her family and being a good grandmother and taking care of her grandchildren. And when it wasn't until she was over 80, when most of her grandchildren no longer sat on her lap, that that she started actually going back to an earlier passion, which was art. And she started painting again, and she was able to sell those paintings for quite a bit. But she never gave up that first passion of producing art, because that's just something that was in her blood. But she was able to commingle it with her passion for her family, and so she used it, her knitting skills, and to express her art in a way that also satisfied her passion for family.
Yeah, that makes sense. We can integrate the other passions, right?
Right.
Within. I love what you said about, the seasons of life, right? I like that. And the last one, chapter 10, the payoff of passion. And now you mentioned Socrates and one of his famous quote, the unexamined life is not worth living.
Right, and which is kind of what I described, when you said what is the opposite of life. It's a mean existence where you're not striving for something because you're apathetic, you don't care, whatever the reason is. But so it's helpful to go through and goes back to our first discussion about self-awareness. If you're not self-aware, it's going to be really hard to grow So
true. And that's another thing. What would you advise young people or adults, all of us, to do to become more self-aware?
Turn off the entertainment. Turn off Netflix and turn off your beats. Just think quietly and think about things and read something. And then after you've read it, think about it and think about it from different angles, take different sides of an argument. And, just the act of thinking and considering things, I think is what people need to do. And I think that would be helpful, for anybody, but just spending time and some people have minds that well, I think it's true that busyness is antithetical to happiness. And we are so busy trying to do things that will make us happy that we're really missing out on what true happiness is because we're so busy we just don't realize how miserable we are or how much we're missing happiness.
That's true. I thought about the distractions before you talked about TV and Netflix. Yeah, we are looking for distractions, most of us do, rather than reflection, right?
Yeah, and that is a really hard habit to break. That I spent a lot of time trying to break that habit early in my life, and fortunately I was able to overcome it. And it was easier for me because I was an introvert, so I wasn't energized by external interactions the way an extrovert is. So, I had the advantage of my disposition there, but everybody can learn to sit quietly and to think and sometimes to not think, sometimes meditate. And when you meditate, don't, try to solve all the world's problems, just be. And if you can sit and just be for a few minutes, even 1 minute, 2 minutes, take whatever piece of silence that you can get and just be there and be in the present moment, then you'll find everything else around you is expanding.
Yeah, that's such a great advice, meditation. Yeah, I agree. So my final questions to you, what was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself?
That's one of the hardest questions to answer. I've learned a lot of hard lessons about myself, and most of them didn't come easy because I am a hard-headed person. But I think one of the most profound lessons that I learned, and maybe the hardest, was that so much of our existence exists in the quality that it does because of our mind, because of things that we can control. And I know that there are people that are suffering that will hear that and say, "Oh no, these things, my life sucks, and this is why." And thinking doesn't make it go away. No, thinking won't make it go away, but by changing the way you view things, you change the way that they affect you. We can't control what happens to us in life, but we can control how we respond to those things. And we can control how we decide to interpret those things. Like I was talking about, values and our experiences earlier on. We need to learn to interpret things in a way that's going to be beneficial to our future and not things that will keep us and hold us back and keep us from developing.
So true. Yeah, it's just being open. Yeah, I love what the word you used, changing our minds, the way we think, shifting perspective, right? So my next question is about, if you knew you would die soon, meaning losing the body, would you make any changes in your life or do anything differently?
Great question. And this goes back to when I was in college and I had just learned that I could learn. So I'd been in high school, failure. Now I was in college. I was the youngest person in any of my classes because I got to college before my fellow high school students had even graduated high school. And I knew that I could learn. But I knew that the tests were intended to test my knowledge. So other people would cram for tests the night before so that it'd all be fresh in their mind. But I went into a test without doing that because I was determined that I wanted to find out what I knew. And if the test showed that I didn't know something, that meant I needed to go and learn more and do something more. That's the way I've always approached life. Rather than cram for a final exam, I try to do everything I can to prepare so that when the test does come, I'm ready for it, and it's an accurate measurement and not just a measurement of what I may remember from the night before. So to your question about life, and if I knew I were to die tomorrow, I wouldn't do anything different. I'd make some phone calls and tell people goodbye, but no, I wouldn't change the way I'm living because I've anticipated that I'm going to die at some point, and I hope that I'm ready for it when that time comes.
Yeah, what a great answer. Do you believe in life after death?
In some form, yeah. Again, I don't pretend to have any profound universal knowledge, but I do think that this body is a temporary experience. Whatever animates our body, when it leaves our body, is going to return to the source, and that source being God, and it'll have some kind of existence, as it were, within that context. I don't know what that context is or what it'll look like, but I don't believe that the body is our life, and when the body dies, that everything is gone.
Right. What are 3 things about life you know for sure as of today, Dennis?
3 things about life. I know for sure that it can be really confusing at times. I know that the circumstances that we find ourselves in, we always have a choice of how we deal with whatever circumstances. So we can choose to let those circumstances sit on us like a ton of bricks, or we can take those circumstances as a pile of bricks and start putting them and stacking them in a correct order so that we can, build whatever kind of house we want to build. We can use those circumstances to build a better life, or we can use those circumstances as excuses for, why we can't do anything. And I know that is a choice, and it's a choice we face all the time, every day. And I also know that life is easier when you've got a family that you can count on and that you can rely on. Those things I know for sure.
Really, really wonderful. Thank you so much for your presence, your wisdom. It has been a meaningful and insightful conversation. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
I have a website, dennishouchin.com, and that's where you find information about my speaking engagements. My book is on Amazon.com or any place that sells ebooks, and it's a free download, so in any format you need. And my other book, The Achievement Protocol, is available on Amazon.com, and that is a small price for that. But that's where all of my stuff is at, and I'm happy to come and talk to groups.
Really great. Thank you so much again, Dennis, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about Dennis Houchin, please visit his website, dennishouchin.rocks.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.